I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Abe. My wife, Chie, was a client. She passed away just 6 months ago after her 3-year battle with Alzheimer's. And I'd like to thank BrightStar for all that they did for us. Just unbelievable. Beyond the call, as they say. We were very fortunate that so many of the employees were highly skilled, competent, caring, capable, dedicated. We're fortunate too because my doctors and my wife's doctors, they mentioned over the course of her illness that it's not easy to find the right caregiver. And if you find the right company, then oftentimes it's difficult to find a particular caregiver that's appropriate for your loved one. The first 2 years of my wife's illness, I was in denial and I refused help. And they tried to pound it into me over and over again, I need help, I need help. And I always felt, nobody can do it as well as I can. Nobody knows her as well as I do. So I refused to help. I said, I'm going to do it on my own. And it got to the point where I was being challenged by the doctors that you'd better get help. So, just by chance, in an emergency room setting, a social worker approached me and she said, I think you need help and I'd like for you to consider these people. And she gave me a card and she said, BrightStar. And I said, BrightStar, I've never heard of that. And she said, call them and see how you can do. And it worked out really quite well. The first girl that came out was so wonderful. And the first day I left, I didn't want to leave the house because I wanted to be with my wife. I didn't feel comfortable leaving her alone with a so-called stranger. But she reassured me that everything would be all right. And when I left, and I said, wow, how long has this been going on? Caregivers. Well, caregiver's job, I found out, is taking care of the patient. They have medical knowledge and skills and experience, and helping with activities of daily living and household chores and things like that that will make the quality of life better. And they did all of that. But my wife's condition continued to deteriorate. And hospice came on board. And hospice said, increase your coverage. Please consider, increase it. Call BrightStar and tell them you want more people, more hours, more days. Consider more evening time when you have trouble and so forth. And so I said, okay. And one day it became kind of critical that I have more help. And the person that I thought that I wanted to have was not available. Excuse me. Just not available. But one of the girls there, I believe it was Lisa, said, we have a new girl we'd like for you to see. We think that you folks would get along well, and why don't you try and see how you like her. Her name is Tina. I think you'll like her. And I said, but I wanted the other girl. She said, but I'm sorry, she's not available. So I said, okay, all right, so Tina will be out. And when Tina came out, she was not the same person that I had expected, because everybody else that I had seen from BrightStar seemed to fit a particular mold. But Tina was different. So I said to myself, let's give her a chance, Thanks to God. She was the best and brightest. She was the hope that I could only pray for and only dream about having. As my wife's condition continued to deteriorate, other girls, as well as they did, and they really did well, and they really cared, they were hesitant in certain things. They were not comfortable in regards to my wife's safety and what they felt comfortable doing, taking her up and down the stairs in particular. What I had longed for was for her to get out of the house and go for a walk, although she's no longer able to walk. She was in a transport chair. And I have to agree with them that it was some cause for concern. You know, the risk involved taking her outside. But Tina comes from a different stock altogether. When I first met her, I had to adjust myself to her. She was different. But immediately what I noticed is she was very respectful, very insightful, and very concerned about the relationship that she was building, not only between the patient, my wife, but also her family, which is me. She was always polite and thoughtful. She never told. She always asked. Mrs. Wilson, I'm going to adjust your pillow, okay? Is that okay? And my wife would nod and smile. And she would do that. She would say, Mr. Wilson, I'm going to make some food for your wife. Would that be all right? And I said, of course. What would she like to have? And I said, well, I don't really know. And she said, well, let me talk to Mrs. Wilson about it and we'll see what we can come up with. She's resourceful. Resourceful is a good word. She's able to engage, and that's the thing that I was missing so much in her declining months. I should mention that when Tina came on board, my wife was already in decline. And I wouldn't admit it, and I didn't recognize it, although the word hospice indicates, 6 months or less. And even hospice said, well, she could go longer. So some people go 2 years. But my wife's condition was deteriorating, and Tina took the time to care about all the little things, the progression, my relationship with my wife's feelings, how we relate as a family, the two of us, and then the three of us, because she became a family member. My wife became less communicative. She couldn't talk. She didn't talk. She was less expressive. Hospice mantra is happiness, comfort, and security. I didn't need to tell Tina any of those things. Those things came with her heart. Here in Hawaii, we were very concerned about our kapuna, the elders, and she brought that with her heritage. She brought that with her, and with her experience. She knew how to deal with people. She knew how to care for the patients. And what I'm trying to say in a roundabout way is she was able to engage my wife. And for the first time in a long time, I saw the spark of life grow again in my wife. My wife spent most of her time sitting on the sofa or lying down or sleeping. But when Tina came on board, my wife would sing with her, dance as well as she could with her. She would talk with her. She would express herself. She would make choices. Tina always gave her the opportunity. For example, in the morning, or when she got her out of bed to dress her, she would say, Mrs. Wilson, what would you like to wear today? Would you like to wear this muumuu? Or would you like to wear the red one? Or would you like to wear the pink one that you like so much? And she would allow my wife the choice, and my wife would point or sometimes say, pink one, or this one. That means a whole lot to me, her family. Is the quality of her life almost exploded. She's able now to make decisions as best she can, have choices. She has dignity, she has respect, she has care and love and support. Let me tell you a story. Tina was always 2 steps ahead of me. I wanted my wife to have comfort. So I went out and I bought new sheets. And I washed the sheets and I put them away aside. And I said, when I have energy, when I'm able to, I'm going to put the new sheets on the bed so my wife can enjoy them. So Tina said, Mr. Wilson, go, we'll be all right. We'll have a nice afternoon. So you can go do what you need to do. And I said, okay. And I went out. And when I came back in the afternoon, Tina greeted me, and she was busy in the kitchen. She prepared some more food and snacks for my wife, which was very important because my wife no longer cared to eat. But Tina was always devising new tastes, new flavors, new experiences for her, with choices. So when I came in the house, Tina said, "Well, Mr. Wilson, I hope you don't mind. I did all the laundry, and I did all the beddings." I said, "Beddings?" And she said, "Yeah, if you don't mind." I went upstairs and I changed all the sheets, and I washed all the sheets, and I made the bed, and I said, "Oh, that's wonderful, I appreciate it." Because that's what I do on Sunday, and I would be so tired, just so tired. But it's already done. But in my mind, I didn't tell Tina. I said, "Oh, I wish I had told her about the new sheets. I really wanted to use the new sheets, now I have to wait." And she said, "Oh, by the way, Mr. Wilson, I hope you don't mind. I got the new sheets out of the closet, and I used the new sheets." I said, how did she know that? She's always one step ahead. When we put my wife Chia to bed at night, which was a big ordeal, the new bed that we bought was too close to the furniture, and it made it very difficult for her to get in. And with the previous girl, I had tried to take the bed apart, and this tiny caregiver was helping me the best she could, and we took the bed apart down to the frame, and I couldn't disassemble the frame, I couldn't move the bed. And that's with two of us, taking the bed apart. So Tina had talked about that space in between the bed and how difficult it is for my wife. And I said, "Tina, one day I gotta hire somebody to come out and move the bed or something." And she said, "Oh, we'll take care of that later on." So again, one day, Tina said, go out and do your things and come back, we'll be fine." I went out and I came back, and Tina greeted me as usual. "Hi, Mr. Wilson, we're having a great time. Mrs. Wilson got to walk around. I helped her to walk around a little bit," which was extraordinary because at that time she was hardly walking at all. And she said, "Oh, I hope you don't mind, I moved the bed." I said, "You did what?" She said, "I moved the bed." I said, "How did you do that?" She said, "I just moved it." I said, "That's a queen-sized bed, it's oversized, and even with the other caregiver's help taking it apart, I wasn't able to move it." She said, "Don't worry, Mr. Wilson, I got your back." Her famous words, "I got your back." And sure enough, when I went upstairs, she had moved the entire bed a good distance and made it easier for my wife to get in and out of the bed. So, we're going about our lives the best way we can. And part of dealing with an Alzheimer's patient is the family, as the primary caregiver, myself, we have to make adjustments. Because once the patient reaches a certain level and the family accommodates that level and is at the same level, and we become comfortable, it changes again. It's constantly changing. Tina was always able to adapt, and she was always able to help me adapt and give me advice. "Why don't you try it this way? Let me show you how I would do it. You don't have to do it this way, but let me show you another way of doing things. Mr. Wilson, you have to protect your back, because if you hurt your back, who's going to take care of Mrs. Wilson? Try it this way. Let me help you." What can I say about that? I learned so many things from her in terms of caregiving and how to provide care and support for her when the two of us are alone. There are many things that I wanted, and somewhere in the back of my mind, realizing that end of life is approaching, I wanted her to experience things that she hadn't done in a while, like being outside and so forth. And one day when Tina was here, and she made a nice breakfast, and she created a new concoction, something that I never dreamed of, something that, after thinking about it, is so simple, so clever. She said, "Mr. Wilson, I hope you don't mind, I'm going to take Mrs. Wilson outside today I said, you are? She said, yeah, I'm going to take her, if it's okay, I'll just take her for a ride in the transport chair. And I said, oh, thanks to God. I've been waiting for this opportunity for so long. And she said, don't worry, I got your back. So later on, when I came home, I asked her, oh, what did you do? She said, oh, we went for a ride. We went around. We had a nice time. And I said, where did you go? I thought she meant in the courtyard, which is, maybe 100 yards at the most, around and back. She said, oh, I took Mrs. Wilson on an excursion. We went to the fire station. I said, fire station? She said, yeah, the fire station. Around the block, on the other side. I said, what did you do at the fire station? And she told me the story, and it melted my heart. And I'll never forget. And I'll never stop thanking her for the opportunity she gave my wife. She took her to the fire station in a transport chair, and she saw the chief outside, and she said, Chief, excuse me, this is Mrs. Wilson, my client. Can I show her inside the fire station? And he put down the water hose, and he said, certainly, come. And then he went on the PA system, and he called all his firemen, and they came down from the chute, or whatever you call it, the pole, and around the corner, and stopped what they were doing. And he said, this is Mrs. Wilson. I'd like for you to show her around the station. And I cannot believe what they did for her. One of the firemen climbed up on a truck and lowered the fire hose down for my wife. And sitting in her wheelchair, she was able to receive the hose as he lowered it down the fire engine. And she was able to hold it in her hand and feel it and touch it and play with it and examine it. And when she was through doing that, she saw the axe attached to the side of the fire engine, and she reached out for it, and the fire chief said, no, I'm sorry. We have liability. We're not allowed to let anybody touch the axe. And Tina said, well, would she be able to touch the truck? And he said, certainly. So they helped her with the transport chair and took her over to the fire truck and let her reach out and feel the beautiful yellow, highly polished fire engine and touch it. Somewhere along the course of the event, the fire chief looked at Tina and said, Mrs. Wilson reminds me of so much of my mother. Can you tell me what kind of sickness she has? And Tina very politely said, I'm sorry, Chief. We're not allowed to give out that information. But as you can see in the chair, she's not doing that well. And the chief had to turn away to hide his tears from her. And there, before he gave her a tour, Tina was very clever, and she told him, Mrs. Wilson is, not well, so please don't do the bells and the sirens, because that might upset her. So, as the visit was winding down, the chief addressed Tina and told her, I think this is a time that you have to leave because we have a call and we have to go. I don't want her to be upset by the siren. So Tina and my wife said thank you, and they left. And as they went around past the end of the fire station, the sirens and the bells and the lights went off and the truck left. And my wife had the experience of a lifetime. After that, I thought that was the end of the excursion, but no. They went farther down around, and they went to the park, where there were some kids playing. Little kids, playing in the dirt, playing with whatever they're playing with. And Tina has a special way of not being afraid of communicating with people. I, on the other hand, don't want any trouble. I don't want any hassle. I don't want anybody bothering my wife. So I would never think of doing what she did. She pulled the transport chair up to close to where they were, and she called out to them, hey kids, come say hello to Mrs. Wilson. Come greet Mrs. Wilson. And I'm saying, what? And as the story unfolds, they all jumped up and they came over and they shook hands and said, "Hi, Mrs. Wilson," and talked to her and said hello, and she got to greet them. And then gradually they went back to playing with what they were playing with. And my wife indicated that there was something on the ground she wanted to touch and play with, and I have no idea to this day what it was. It was some kind of a brick or piece of concrete or something, and so Tina bent down and picked it up and held it out for her so that she could touch it and feel it. And my wife was very happy. So I thought, what an adventure she had. And then Tina said, no. After that, we went around the block and we went to Foodland to do some shopping. You remember I asked you if we can go shopping? And I said, oh yeah. And so I said, so what happened? And she said, when we went into Foodland, there's a deli in the front. Somebody in the deli saw us coming, and she came running out from the deli, and she said, would you like to have a sample? And Tina said, could Mrs. Wilson have something? And he said, sure. So they both shared samples from the deli. And when that was finished, Tina took her down every aisle in Foodland. And she took her down in the center of the aisle, because my wife was having a bowl in her chair, reaching out from side to side to everything that she saw, reaching out. But she wasn't able to knock anything off the shelf or grab anything, but she had a great time enjoying and looking. And when they got their purchases, they went to the cash register, and she said Mrs. Wilson was very good. She behaved herself, and she sat in her chair, and they paid for the merchandise, and then she got to hold the bag, and they came home. And I cried. Who is going to do that kind of a thing for our elderly, for our kapuna, for people with disabilities, for someone with Alzheimer's who has difficulty communicating, who has difficulty relating, who has difficulty understanding the condition that they're faced with? As long as I live, I will never forget the experiences that she shared with my wife. At home, she would laugh. She would talk with my wife. Talk with my wife, not talk to my wife. Ask questions. How are you feeling? Are you sleepy, Mrs. Wilson? Not, oh, it's time for you to take a nap, or maybe you should lie down. It's, would you like to lie down? No? You want to watch TV? Do you want to watch your cartoons? And that was another thing. Before my wife's illness deteriorated, thank goodness for TV. TV was a very important part of occupying her mind and her time. But even I have to admit, you can only watch so much home improvement and home and garden TV. After a while, it gets old. Yeah. And Tina said, maybe Mrs. Wilson would like to watch cartoons. I said, cartoons? What do you mean? You mean like Popeye or something like that? And she said, well, that too, but I mean PBS. I said, I never thought of that. See, here's the thing. Caregiver can help the family in caring for their loved ones by offering suggestions and ideas. Offering suggestions and ideas. Things that are so simple that afterwards we say, oh, why didn't I think of that? And when we turned on PBS, it opened another world for her. Because persons with dementia, with Alzheimer's, they regress. Their childhood memories become more pronounced. They become childlike in many ways. That's not taking anything away from them or being derogatory. But it allowed her the simpler time, fun, beautiful colors. That's why I was told that when you go to a store like Sears and they have the TVs on, or Costco, a lot of times it's cartoons because the colors are bright and entertaining, and the sounds are warm and entertaining. So, towards the end of her life, she watched a lot of programs, I can't remember the names, like Dinosaur Train and things like that, and she developed her own favorites. Oh, I like this one, and this one not so much. And that was a gift from Tina, something that she enjoyed. And later on, I came back and I found there's no cartoons on TV, there's Hawaiian music. I said, what is this? She said, I thought Mrs. Wilson would like some music. So they have music stations on the TV. So I tried to put on classical music for her and she liked it okay. But when one of your lady friends called, she said, oh, try Hawaiian. And when I put the Hawaiian music on, she responded to it. So to this day, 6 months after she has passed away, I still have Hawaiian music on the TV. Innovation, engagement, suggestions and recommendations for the family. These all sound like ordinary simple things that anybody would think about, but not so. They come from the heart, they come from sharing, they come from caring about the people that you care for. And that's, to me, what caregiving is all about. Not everybody can do what BrightStar does. And not all of the girls in BrightStar can do what Tina does. They're all good. They all have their specialties. But Tina is a special breed. She's a special kind of person. If you want to talk about God, you would say, God made her a caregiver. She has a special heart. She has the aloha. She has the Hawaiian spirit. She has the love. She has experience from her own family life and caregiving and what it means. And the funny thing is, it just comes out. It's not something that she has to scratch her head and think about and say, what do I do now? It's part of who she is. I've learned about taking care of bathroom things, cleaning, hygiene. I've learned about modesty. I've learned about how to approach them. And all the people at BrightStar know that. But she takes it a step further with dignity. How can we take care of Mrs. Wilson with dignity? How do I say? When you approach somebody with disability, when you approach somebody with caregiving, you look for their inner needs as well as their outer needs. Everybody talks about ADLs, everybody talks about, as I was speaking before, about bathroom business and so forth. But what about traditions for the family and memories for the family? In our circumstances, we didn't have a tree, a Christmas tree, for several years. And hospice was encouraging me to clean up the house because there was not enough room for a tree. And time is approaching, maybe this might be her last Christmas. So I said, okay. So I did all the physical work and cleaning up and making space for a tree, but we had no tree. And then BrightStar called up one day and said, I'm calling to ask, Lisa called, would you like to have a Christmas tree? We'd like to provide a tree for you. I said, that would be wonderful. What do I have to do? And she said, nothing. Just tell me what size, how big, how much. Do you need a stand? And I said, yeah, I think I need a stand. She said, okay. And then when can we deliver it? I'll have my elf deliver it. I said, you have an elf? She said, yes, I have my personal elf. So I said, yeah. She said, Stephen is my elf. I'll have him deliver it. So I said, this is wonderful, and this is really what I wanted, but I didn't know how to do it. I didn't have the ability, the time, the strength, the energy to get a tree. And then here's a beautiful tree, the most beautiful tree we ever had, delivered, set up, and provided for us right there. Great! Wonderful! Look at your tree. I always call my wife Little. Little, look at your tree. She looked at it and she said, She was very happy with the tree. How am I going to decorate it? What am I going to do? I'm exhausted all the time. I don't have the energy. Tina said, no worry, Mr. Wilson, I got your back. Show me where the decorations are. And I did. I showed her where the decorations are. And We pulled them out and we pulled them all downstairs. And she said, don't worry, I'll take care of it. And as usual, she said, Mr. Wilson, everything's under control. Why don't you go take care of your things? And when I came back in the afternoon, she said, oh, hi, Mr. Wilson, I hope you don't mind. We decorated the tree. We decorated the tree. I said, you both did? And she said, yes. It took a while. I put Mrs. Wilson in the transport chair, and I brought her all the decorations, and with her permission, we decorated the tree. And each step of the way, I asked her, which one do you like? The red one or the green one? And she would say, the green one. And then I would give her the green one, and then I would push her to the tree, and she would put it in the place where she wanted it to be. And we did that for all the balls and the decorations and the little doodads and things all around the tree. And so where she couldn't reach, I said, Mrs. Wilson, I'm going to put this. Where do you want me to put it? And she would say, over there. And she would say, over here? Yes. And she would put it there. And when I came in, I cried because the tree was decorated from the top to the bottom and all the way around. And it was beautiful. We left that tree up until, I don't know, maybe the end of February. She had already passed away on the 4th, but I couldn't take the tree down because it meant so much to both of us. And this was a gift that Tina did. A gift from BrightStar to provide the tree for us and help us to set it up. But Tina took it a step further, and then a step further, and then a step further by engaging, I love that word, engaging my wife so that she could decorate her tree. She physically hung the ornaments, chose the ornaments, and placed them. Is that enough? No. Tina said, Mr. Wilson, we have the tree decorated, so if you don't mind, I'm going to, with Mrs. Wilson's help, and okay, I'm going to do some more decorating around the house. And when I came home, the entire downstairs, the railings for all the stairways, and everything was decorated beautifully. Now, when you decorate the house, you use Scotch tape, tacks, and maybe a nail, or things like that. But there was one ingredient that Tina used that you could see wherever the decorations were, and that was love. Love. Everywhere you looked, you saw Tina's love in what she did and love for the client that she loved and took care of her so much. And you could see the love that she shared with my wife Chia for her last Christmas. I can go on all day and tell you more stories, but there is a story I'd like to share with you about Tina's voice. Excuse me. Tina is not soft-spoken. Not soft-spoken at all. So here we are, 8:30 at night. And for some reason the neighborhood is dead quiet. We live in a townhouse, so there are other houses and people and families very close by. And it is silent, absolutely silent. And Tina says, okay, Mrs. Wilson, it's time to go upstairs. I'm going to take you upstairs. Let's go. And we help my wife upstairs and we get her all cleaned up and ready for bed. And she says, okay, Mrs. Wilson, before I go, and before you sleep, we're going to sing a song. And I say, oh my goodness, what are we getting into now? Because my wife cannot communicate. She cannot, how do you say it? She wouldn't be able to follow along with a song. And so I'm standing at the foot of the bed with my head down, thinking, sad thoughts about my wife. And Tina begins a song. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. And my wife joins in. How I wonder what you are. And the tears are coming down my face. And my wife went through the whole song with a big smile, full of happiness and joy, almost a child again. But the point beyond that touching moment was you got to have spirit. Amor, you have to have spirit. And when Tina says, okay, Mrs. Wilson, let's sing a song at 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night, in the still of the night, when there's not a sound outside, she says, come on, Mrs. Wilson, let's sing. Twinkle, twinkle. And I think everybody in the neighborhood is joining in. It was just so touching beyond words. And if you feel that I was touched, more important, my wife was touched. And I cannot help believe in God that God was touched too, at how much this woman cares. I forgot to mention, the hopefully amusing part of this story was Tina would always be concerned about range of motion because my wife's body was becoming stiff and she wasn't able to move well. So here again at 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night, Tina would say, Mrs. Wilson, we're going to do a little bit exercise, okay, so you can loosen up your legs and your arms, okay? Are you ready? Let's lift that leg. 1, 2, up, down. And I imagine all over the neighborhood there's people in bed lifting their legs, lifting their arms. I felt a little embarrassed at first, but it was a joy and a wonderful, marvelous memory. I tried to emphasize over and over in my little talk to you today about the caring part of caregiving. And we've been very fortunate with BrightStar. I mentioned once before, I understand it is hard to find the right agency. And you're lucky if after 3 or 4 or 5 tries you can find the right person that the client or the family or both will get along with. But we've been lucky all the way through. But Tina is head and shoulders the best. Born to be a caregiver. Born to share her love, her aloha spirit. You know how important caregiving is? It's not just so that, if I can say this on the camera, it's not just, is the person so cold and clean? Have they soiled themselves? Do they need to change their depends? Caregiving is not just, did we brush your teeth tonight? Or did we bathe you? Okay. It's not just, are you comfortable? It's the whole family, everybody. The difference that you can make in somebody's life by being a caregiver is this. She was often, towards the end, very, very, very quiet and difficult to communicate with. And as a spouse, as a primary caregiver, as they call it, it's really, really difficult. It's very hard to take when you cannot feel that expression of love. You cannot feel that communication, that spark of life. Well, I'm downstairs. Tina is upstairs saying, I got your back, Mr. Wilson. I'll take care of everything. I'll get her out of bed. I'll clean her up. I'll help her to bathe. I'll get her range of motion. I'll massage her face and fix her makeup and her hair. But she, again, the word engages my wife. And so my wife is not like just like a doll or a puppet or something like that. She has a spark of life in her again while she has the energy. So Tina is very slowly, carefully bringing my wife down the stairs. And my wife and I haven't exchanged thoughtful, romantic words for a while, I love you and this and that. If I say I love you little, she'll say, But they got down to the landing of the stairs, and I'm down here, coming in the door, and Tina calls out, Mrs. Wilson, look who's here. It's Dad. Dad's home. And I come into view of them, and Tina says to my wife, Mrs. Wilson, don't you have something you want to say to Dad? And my wife, eyes open wide, with a big smile from ear to ear, she throws me a kiss with her hand. She says, Hi, Dad! Why don't you come and give us a kiss? I cried. Because my wife was alive again. In a body that I didn't know and understand was racked with pain, agonizing pain, with her suffering and continuing to try to do her best. And unable to express herself much of the time, she called to me in that voice with that wonderful smile, full of life and energy, Come give us a kiss. And I ran up those stairs and I gave her a kiss. And I wanted to kiss Tina too, but that's another story. How do you say thank you to somebody like that? I mentioned that there was another thing I wanted to talk to you about is what does a caregiver do? They take care of the dependents and they brush the teeth, and I can do all of that. I learned from them. I learned from the BrightStar staff. I learned from others too. And I learned from experience, hard experience. But what Tina brought to it was another thing. I mentioned the word before, dignity. She always thought of my wife, not as a client, not as a patient, but as a person, a human being, a woman. So, she'd get her ready in the morning. She'd help her to put on her makeup. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know how to express it. Anybody else would and could, put on her lipstick. I did that. I did that with all the love I could. But
beautiful.
but Tina was dedicated and concerned for her as her image as a woman. She's a woman. I want her to feel good as a woman. I want her to look her best. So she would brush her hair just right and show her the mirror and show herself and then put her lipstick on and maybe pluck her eyebrows and this and that. And again, with so much aloha and love, she did all those things. Dignity. I guess maybe I'm getting towards the end of the story. So here's Tina. She gets a paycheck. Everybody gets a paycheck, and they all deserve it. They earn it. Especially BrightStar. They earn it. They work for it. But here we now, hospice is talking to me, and they're saying, I'm sorry to say, and I'm getting sick and scared, we're getting at the end of life, Mr. Wilson. And some of the girls from BrightStar, they don't miss a beat. They're still there. They're still doing what they do the best they can. But on that fateful day, Tina wasn't there. She wasn't working. It was another girl. And when things suddenly changed, and things changed quickly, and they went bad, hospice said, Hey, Mr. Wilson, I'm sorry. We're at that point. We have only a matter of hours. Who do you want to call? Who do you want to be here? And there were several people here. Somebody from BrightStar, somebody from hospice, and this and that. We say, the family, we've got to call the family. And then we did that. And then all of a sudden, there was several of us here. It was in unison. It's like a TV show that you would see on TV. All of a sudden, everybody in unison said, Tina! One mind, one thought, one spirit. Tina! She has to be here. And so they said, we'll take care of that, Mr. Wilson. Be with your wife. And Not too long after that, Tina arrived at the door. Hi, Mr. Wilson. And she stayed with my wife on the entire journey as a friend, a companion, a family member. Now, there was another person from BrightStar who was on the job, and that person was spectacular. But Tina came on her own accord, and she stayed too, to help. And several things happened at that time. We had prayers. Not everyone is a Catholic. Not everyone is a Christian. But we had prayers, and several of the people joined in. Excuse me. We wanted the family involved. And so several of us talked among ourselves, and then I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was. They said Skype. And I said, oh, okay. And I cannot think anymore. So between BrightStar and Hospice, they all hustled and they got it all together. And then the stupid computer didn't work. So we couldn't get the Skype to work. But they said, Mr. Wilson, let us take care of it. And then they got it working. And they set up the Skype so that the kids and the grandkids could be involved. And Tina was a part of that. And Tina was always a part of taking care of my wife, at the same time making sure everybody else in the house, and there were quite a few people here, was comfortable, and everything that needed to be done was taken care of. If somebody needed to get this, she was willing to get this. If somebody needed help with that, she was willing to help with that. And she accompanied us on the entire journey. And when my wife finally passed away, when the hospice nurse said, Abe, which is unusual because she always referred to me as Mr. Wilson. She said, Abe, last breath, come. So I said, oh, did my wife do something cute? Did she say something to the family on the Skype? He said, last breath. I'm not sure, but we have to check. So you be with your wife. You didn't miss anything, you were here, but when you turned, I believe she took her last breath. And then now she's using the stethoscope and checking. And I believe people are crying. Tina was there. She's not on duty. She's not scheduled to work, but she's there. And when the girl from hospice said, TOD 542, and people sank and cried, and I was saying, what's going on? Tina was there. And when Allison put her hand on my shoulder, and I remember that clearly, to comfort me, and said, I'm sorry. There was a big silence. And I seem to remember screaming for a long time. And Allison's hand was on my shoulder. And Tina was there. After that, a great silence engulfed us, and people in my ears seemed to be speaking in whispers. I could hear them, but I was numb. And there were a couple of the girls from hospice there, and there were several people from BrightStar, and all seemed to know what they were doing and why and how. BrightStar, the girl who was on duty, and she's a treasure. She's a treasure. She moved quickly to do this, to do that. And I said, what are we doing? What's going on? What is happening? And they explained to me, we have to clean Mrs. Wilson and prepare her for the mortuary. And hospice was called in the mortuary to make the arrangements. And hospice had things that they had to do. There's a ritual that they need to do about immediately destroying and dispensing with the medication that was prescribed for end of life. And they were working on that, as well as making sure that I'm okay, and making sure everybody else is okay. So many people from BrightStar were here. Allison gave me time alone and came back to comfort me. Ivy was sitting right there. I could see her sitting right there with tears in her eyes. And Jennifer, I haven't mentioned Jennifer's name. She was here taking care of my wife. And Tina was there. So what happens when they clean the body? When they clean the body, it's not a very pleasant subject. It's not a very pleasant task. But even in my grief, I observed the greatest, greatest, greatest love and care. A gentleness like I cannot even begin to describe. A quiet, serene sincerity that all shown to my wife in turning her body and repositioning her and cleaning her and whatever the formalities they had to do. And then I can hear Tina's voice saying, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Wilson. So, what? We're going to get something for her to wear, a gown. She's wearing right now her, night clothes and depends, but we want her something nice to wear. Do you have anything that you want to wear, or can I recommend something? I said, please do. What do you think? I cannot think. What do you think? She said, her pink, remember her pink dress, her pink muumuu? I think that's the best. And I said, yeah, that's right. I agree. That's the best. She said, can I go get it for her? And I said, please do. She ran up the stairs, and she came back with Mr. Wilson, the flap is torn. I have to sew the flap. And I said, I don't know where the stuff is. I don't know where it is. She says, does she have, Mrs. Wilson have sewing stuff? I said, she does. I don't know where. I think it's behind the tree, behind the Christmas tree, in the drawer. She said, I got your back. Don't worry, Mr. Wilson, I'll take care of it. So I'm looking around in the daze, and I don't know what's going on. And I see Tina with something in her mouth, and she's sewing away. And I said, you got it? You got it? She said, don't worry, Mr. Wilson, I got it. And of all times that somebody has to do something like that is at that moment. But like she said, I got your back. And she's sewing the muumuu carefully and lovingly. Not just sewing it, I gotta get this done because we gotta put it on before they come for. No. Every stitch was love. Almost like you could say every stitch was a prayer for somebody that she cared about. Not just a client, not just a patient, but somebody she cared for and cared about. So, the muumuu is sewn, and it's ready, and they dress her. Excuse me. Hospice comes and tells me, all the arrangements are ready. You don't have to worry about anything. The mortuary will send somebody here, and they will take care of her with all the respect. So you don't need to worry. But now we have to leave. And so people started to leave. And this is what somebody like me, a surviving spouse, fears, is the time when everybody leaves. Tina was there. She was there. Tina was there. Tina didn't say, Mr. Wilson, I'm going to leave you alone now and let you and your family, grieve, this and that. She stand by. So there is my wife, all dressed up and covered up nicely. You can't see it, but there's a shell of love from so many people around her, almost like a glow. You can't see it, but it's there. The way they move her. Somebody would say, and I hate to use the word, dead. She's dead. What does it matter? But with every turn, every movement of her body, it was done with love. Almost as though they don't want her to suffer any more pain. And certainly they don't want her to suffer any indignity. All through that time, Tina was there. A word about Jennifer, if I could. Jennifer has to go. Her shift is over. She's done. She didn't want to leave, but her ride came and she has to go. Her own personal family things. And so she said, bye, Mr. Wilson. Don't worry, I'll see you again. And she started to leave. And I felt an emptiness inside. But this is the caliber of the people at BrightStar. She suddenly remembered something, which was what we call a ritual. And she turned around and she came rushing back. And she caressed my wife's face and hair. And she said, Mrs. Wilson, I'm going to go now. I'll see you next time. And she caressed her hair nicely and she said, bye, Mrs. Wilson, bye for now, which was, if you understand my family, that's a tradition that my wife established. You don't say goodbye because it's permanent. You say bye for now. And Jennifer looked at her and said, bye for now, like she always did. And she left. And Tina was there. Still there. And Tina said, Mr. Wilson, I hate to go, but I have to leave you now. But I want you to know how much of an honor it was for me to take care of Jay and you. To me, this means something. This means something to me because it's self-explanatory. I mean, she's not just taking care of a client or a patient. She's taking care of the family with love and again, aloha. And she said, anything you need, you call me. Anything that I can do for you, you let me know. I'll be here to help you with the arrangements. I'll be here to help you. I'll see you all the way through. The funeral, the burial. We're like family now. I'm here for you if you need anything. And when she finally did leave, how do you say this about a caregiver? I felt her spirit was still there with us, with me and my wife. Because she means what she says. So I think I've taken you along the journey, and along the journey I failed to remember at this time. After this is over, I'll say, oh, I forgot to say this, I forgot to say that. Caregiving, we learn as we go along, you know. Yeah. In life we learn everything. We don't learn something and then now we got it and that's it. We continue to learn and understand and it continues to unfold. And right now when I'm talking to you, I feel that caregiving doesn't end. It continues to touch us. It continues to reach into our hearts. And one thing that is probably not a concern here, it also gives us a way that we can reach out and touch somebody else. So all the wonderful things that we receive from BrightStar, they touched our lives in so many ways. Tina especially, I think you need more film or camera or whatever you need to talk about Tina, because I just can't say enough about her. She actually reached in and touched our lives. I use the word one more time, engaged. It's so important to me because I feel like there's so many people out there that their loved ones pass away without ever being engaged. Yeah. But, oh, grandma couldn't talk, oh, my wife couldn't say this, oh, my husband couldn't do this anymore. I wonder if he ever was able to. I don't wonder, I know. She was engaged. May sound a little funny. I shared with you the Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. To this day, when I go to the grave, I sing that song to my wife because she was alive and engaged. Her eyes were full of life. We could talk about hope. We could talk about health and feelings. But in those moments with Tina, my wife was alive. So, thank you, Tina, and thank you, BrightStar. The past 6 months or so that Tina was on board, or maybe more, I can't remember now, it made all the difference in the quality of life that my wife experienced. It made all the difference in the quality of life that my wife and I were able to share, even in our private time, until now. 6 months after she's gone, it made a difference, and it continues to do so.